All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing started. Ooh, there we go. And ooh, I'm a little high. I'm a little high because I want everybody to see this. Man, well, you can see enough. Anyway, let's get started. Today's date, November 9th, 2019, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, most Will Buchanan. On How the Frack We Got Here, we do try to take the events of the week and honestly try to make sense of it all. Before I do get started, this is an adult podcast, which means things of adult language may be said, and some things of a graphic nature may be shown, so viewer discretion is definitely advised. That being said, let's go ahead and get into it. A lot of you guys have probably seen basically billionaires crying, especially Bill Gates and J.P. Morgan's Jamie Dimon, billionaires. Keep in mind I said billionaires with a B are currently going on news cycles and things of that nature, pretty much crying about the fact of, well, if the Democrats have it their way, they're going to make us pay more. Let me say this first and foremost. You are a billionaire. Money is like your financial problems, as far as normal things to guys like me, are non-existent. You have the finer things in life. At the same time, if you have to pay more, then so be it. Guess what? You're not exactly broke afterwards, honestly. And the reason why I point that out is because in this story here, of course, Bill Gates kind of made a joke where he sat there and said, well, he says it's a joke. I think he's being dead ass serious, where he says if Warren is proposing a 6% wealth tax on fortunes above $1 billion to help fund Medicaid for all. And he's pretty much saying, well, he said in the joke, well, if my net worth is over $109 billion and I'm paying over $100 billion, I'm gonna have to look back and see what it's about. Even though he said he was just kidding. Don't get me wrong when I say something about this, about Elizabeth Warren. Not that I'm endorsing any candidates, like I always said before. I try to keep it as nonpartisan as I can and try to explain the facts as best as I can to give a very clear view of everybody. But Elizabeth Warren has gone along with Bernie Sanders, has also sat there and said, yeah, we're going to tax the rich because they're rich. And historically, when the rich have paid more in taxes to the American tax system, the economy has flourished. Feel free to look it up because I actually went to look it up just to make sure I was saying it right. Every time the rich have paid taxes over 85% or more, the economy has flourished because the middle and lower classes paid less. Tax breaks were given to the middle and lower classes, and at the same time they were encouraged and they stimulated spending, which made the economy great. Which nowadays is kind of the reverse order because the middle and lower class are actually paying more while the rich are paying less. So it's amazing to me that Senator Warren pretty much, and like I said, between Warren and Sanders, they are pretty much trying to sit there and say in so many words, yes, we are going to tax the rich. And reason being, I can't see what's the problem except for the fact that a lot of people who aren't rich by most standards are actually complaining about it, which mystifies me. Because if you're not rich and you're complaining about, and you see that people that make more money than you are going to get taxed more than you, and you're probably going to be paying less, why are you complaining? Aside from the fact that it's coming from the Democrats, you might be a conservative, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting that, billionaires are complaining. Yes, people who literally could pay off everything in my lifetime with the chump change in their couch are complaining about paying more. Imagine that. Moving on from that, guys, I'm pretty sure you have seen the latest, I don't like to call it the Ukraine scandal. I like to call it, how can I put this in so many words? I like to call it the camel that might finally break President Cheeto's back. And this is what I'm talking about.
Unveiled from two key witnesses point to White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney as the one who coordinated the quid pro quo demand with Ukraine. Fiona Hill, the White House's former top Russia advisor, telling lawmakers last month that EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland made Mulvaney's instructions clear when they met with Ukrainian officials July 10th at the White House. Hill testifying, Ambassador Sondland, in front of the Ukrainians as I came in, was talking about how he had an agreement with Chief of Staff Mulvaney for a meeting with the Ukrainians if they were going to go forward with investigations. The White House's top expert on Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, echoed that, saying investigations by Ukraine were the deliverable coordinated by Mulvaney. Sondland just said that he had a conversation with Mr. Mulvaney, and this is what was required in order to get a meeting. Vindman adding there was no ambiguity that a White House meeting was contingent on Ukraine opening an investigation into Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Several witnesses have testified that the holdup of military aid for Ukraine was also directed by Mulvaney. Hill recounted how the proposed deal alarmed then National Security Advisor John Bolton, who she said immediately stiffened and ended the July 10th meeting. Last month, Mulvaney admitted there was indeed a quid pro quo before he later walked it back.
I have news for everybody. Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy.
Vindman also discussed how he drafted talking points ahead of that July 25th phone call between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, and said his suggestions definitely did not include anything about investigations into the 2016 election, the Bidens, or Burisma. When Fiona Hill finally read the rough transcript of the president's call with Zelensky, she said she was very shocked and very saddened about Trump's pretty blatant push for politically motivated investigations. Hill also recounted how Gordon Sondland made clear he was in charge of Ukraine affairs, describing a blow-up with him. When she later asked who put him in charge, he said the president, Hill testified. Well, that shut me up because you can't really argue with that.
That's a lot. How can we put this? For all those that don't know about Ukraine, apparently, like I said, going back to about a month ago, where the president, actually about a month and a half ago now, the president had a talk with the prime minister of Ukraine, pretty much saying a quid pro quo about, hey, you do this and we'll help you out. Of course, this has been denied multiple times. The transcript, which is already out there for the world to see, blatantly shows that President Cheeto did actually try to do a quid pro quo. And now the White House is now throwing their scapegoat on the bus, which is basically saying, oh, no, it wasn't the president. It was the person that created the stuff for the president to say. And yet the president have a brain to sit there and go, I don't think I can say this. And so, of course, this is just the latest. This is honestly the latest in the smokescreen. Keep in mind, the impeachment inquiries are still going on with the Democrats, and they are moving forward with actually having public hearings for the world to see. Because NPR has already stated that, and BBC are going to actually be showing the impeachment hearings publicly, as Trump has tried to get those to be closed camera, which is actually kind of funny if you think about it, because Republicans are actually backing him on that, saying that the impeachment hearings should not be public, yet they were the same ones that went after Clinton for a blowjob, and you can see it on almost every news station back then. I'm just saying, if it's good enough for a blowjob, it's good enough for somebody who's literally impeached themselves so many times that I'm surprised they're still president. But again, the Ukraine scandal just might be the camel that just broke. That might be all it. It might be the camel that breaks the back finally. And I'm not complaining one bit. I just think it's funny as hell that how much more is it going to take for us to realize that he truly is incompetent? For all those that already know he's incompetent, and for all those that are still believing that he's not incompetent. But again, it's almost in the same sense of the Celebrity Apprentice, except we just can't get rid of the reality. We can't get rid of the TV star for some odd reason because we need the ratings. Figure that one out. But moving right along, there was another story I wanted to cover that I did not know about very much. Apparently, this is a big story right now. Doesn't get a lot of news coverage like it should. But about the case of Rodney Reed. For all those that don't know, here's the actual Here's the actual story about it and why it's so important.
In 1996, 19-year-old Stacy Stites was found dead on the side of a road in Bastrop, Texas. She was partially dressed, bruised, and strangled with a belt. Investigators say she was raped and murdered just after 3 a.m. on her way to work at a grocery store. For months, the prime suspect was her fiancé, a police officer named Jimmy Fennell, until DNA evidence pointed to another man she knew. A year later, tests confirmed Rodney Reed's semen was found inside Stites. A jury convicted Reed and sent him to death row. But the saga was just beginning.
It almost reads like a book. Hopefully, we don't execute the wrong man for this murder.
Reed's attorneys say the evidence points to Jimmy Fennell as the killer. They say Reed and Stites were engaged in a consensual affair and Fennell found out about it. Reed talked about this in an interview.
Prior to her death, there was a time when we was together, and she said that if Jimmy found out that we were together, that he would kill me. I just took it as a figure of speech. I didn't take it literally.
And that is clear motive for him to have killed Stacy and ultimately having Rodney Reed take the fall for that murder.
Reed's case has garnered celebrity attention. Kim Kardashian, Rihanna, and others are pushing to stop Reed's execution scheduled for November 20th. Reed's lawyers say the murder investigation is full of holes. They say the time of death isn't accurate and that police never searched the apartment where Fennell and Stites lived together, and that DNA tests were never conducted on the belt used as the murder weapon. But Fennell's lawyer says the push to exonerate Reed is a circus that has been rejected by appeals courts and that Reed is a monster.
Rodney Reed is a garden variety sociopath who has convinced his lawyers and lots of other people that he's just a poor, unfairly charged black man being railroaded to the death chamber.
Prosecutors here in Bastrop, Texas maintain Rodney Reed is guilty and deserves the death penalty. They have also pointed out in court documents that Reed was suspected of sexually assaulting and raping 6 other women. He was acquitted in just one of those cases.
These are allegations, they're not convictions, and they have nothing to do with whether or not Rodney Reed committed the murder for which they're trying to execute him.
There's also this. Jimmy Fennell spent 10 years in prison for kidnapping and raping a woman in 2007 while he was on duty as a police officer. In a court affidavit, an Aryan Brotherhood inmate claims that when they were in prison, Fennell said to him, "I had to kill my N-word loving fiance."
The next surprise witness will be Mother Teresa appearing via Epiphany. Each one of these stories is laughably lacking in credibility.
Rodney Reed also has one advocate that once lived by him on death row.
Anthony Graves, you spent 18 and a half years on Texas death row. You were fully exonerated, released, you were wrongly convicted. Why do you relate to Rodney Reed?
I relate to Rodney because I know for a fact that those same players didn't give a damn about whether I was innocent or not.
Anthony Graves was wrongly accused of murdering a family of 6 people in 1992. The same judge, medical examiner, and court-appointed defense attorneys that worked his case also worked Rodney Reed's murder trial.
I was in his seat. I know his story. It just sends chills up my spine when I read and know what Rodney is going through.
Graves has been free almost 10 years and now works as a criminal justice reform advocate.
A young white woman was murdered and a black man was convicted of it. That is their case. They're not listening to anything else. Rodney Reed was definitely framed, and they're taking it all the way to the execution table.
While prosecutors who worked the case say the thought of Rodney Reed getting out of prison is absolutely terrifying. Ed Lavandera, CNN, Bastrop.
And that story, folks, is definitely a realistic one. When I looked into it, it's one of those stories that you see people who literally are pushing for the death penalty about this guy, and the story doesn't make sense, the evidence doesn't add up, and the simple fact of the matter is, it just comes down to the fact of the matter is that this needs to have a proper investigation, especially the fact in Texas where this happened, where they said the judge, the medical examiner, and the prosecutor seem to be all in it. The reason why this might sound familiar, anybody remember the Exonerated 5, Central Park 5? Remember, five young black men were accused of raping one white woman, and they railroaded them into false confessions. Keep in mind, the prosecutor, the police, and the court were never held responsible. So again, why does the story sound so familiar? It's just the simple fact of the matter is that it seems to be that justice is missing for the simple fact of killing a black man, simply put, because he's on death row. And at the same time, the man deserves a fair trial. That's what we're all guaranteed in this country, supposedly, is a fair trial. So for the simple fact of the matter that this man is really protesting his innocence, and there's so much uncertainty behind this case, one would think someone would say, wait a minute, we really need to investigate this, because the simple fact of the matter, things aren't adding up. And again, I hope he does actually get that fair day in trial. And like I said, the worst thing out of this is that an innocent man gets killed for a crime he didn't commit, and that's the thing. That's it in my mind, because much like every other black man that's been killed, and whatnot, you automatically relate because, well, that could have been you. But again, I'm hoping that man does get his fair day in court, and hopefully they're not trying to speed it up just because they sentenced a black man to die and now have to walk that back. But we will see. But speaking of other things, like I said, I was speaking about earlier about President Cheeto and his impeachment. Well, so far, I have to clarify this because a lot of people are thinking, oh, we're just going to go ahead with impeachment. No, it's still impeachment inquiries. That means that they're still holding hearings on gathering information. They haven't officially signed the articles of impeachment. So a lot of people are already sitting there saying about impeachment, which it really should have happened anyway, even though we got the Mueller report that pretty much shed that, yeah, there's a lot of smoke there. And when we got the transcripts from the Ukraine talk, yeah, again. And then on the multiple times Trump has paid himself for going back home on Tristan Mar-a-Lago, directing army personnel and whatnot to his hotels in which he was making money off us. And it still is. So how is this not all conflicting points of impeachment? I don't know how he's been able to pass all that. I do know the fact of the matter is eventually that has to all come to light. But here's what we have so far in the impeachment as it goes.
Impeachment showdown after
Republicans have been arguing about the inquiry, saying, why is this behind closed doors? Tonight, President Trump saying these hearings should not be on TV. And President Trump today on another phone call that he had with Ukraine's president. He now says he might release that call as well. And all of this as the president's former national security advisor, John Bolton, his attorney, now signaling that Bolton knows plenty about meetings and conversations on Ukraine. ABC's Terry Moran tonight at the White House.
For weeks, President Trump and Republicans blasted Democrats for holding impeachment hearings behind closed doors. But now that the public hearings will begin next week, Trump is far from satisfied.
Well, they shouldn't be having public hearings. This is a hoax. This is just like the Russian witch hunt. This is just a continuation.
The president insisting he's got nothing to worry about.
I'm not concerned about anything. The testimony has all been fine. I mean, for the most part, I never even heard of these people. I have no idea who they are. All that matters is one thing, the transcript.
But the witnesses to Trump's dealings with Ukraine may matter too. And today, John Bolton, his former national security advisor, made clear he's got something to say. In a letter sent to Congress, Bolton's lawyer says his client was personally involved in many of the events, meetings, and conversations that investigators have already heard about, as well as many relevant meetings and conversations that have not yet been discussed. Bolton wants a court to resolve whether he should follow White House instructions not to testify or obey Congress's subpoena. But Democrats are moving fast, releasing today another transcript from a key witness, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, a Ukraine expert inside the White House. Vindman, who was on that call between Trump and the president of Ukraine, was asked if he had any doubt Trump was asking for investigations of his political opponents. There was no doubt, Vindman said. President Trump, even as he proclaims that call to be perfect, is also distancing himself from key witnesses, like his ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, a Trump loyalist who raised $1 million for the Trump campaign in 2016, and who the president once called a really good man and a great American. Now that Sondland has testified Trump was seeking a quid pro quo with Ukraine, here's what the president says about him.
Let me just tell you, I hardly know the gentleman.
Terry Moran live in Washington tonight. Terry, the president was also pressed today about another phone call with Ukrainian's President Zelensky, and the president said he might release the transcript of that call too.
That's right, David. The president called President Zelensky right after Zelensky was elected in April. And the president says he might release the call. He says he might hold back because with other world leaders, he doesn't want them to think every one of their calls would get released. But he did say, quote, I'm very transparent. Nobody is more transparent than.
Yeah, let's not finish that sentence. So for still fact, like I was saying earlier, he is pissed about the public hearings that are going to happen. Keep in mind, Bill Clinton's administration, they had public hearings when he had some extramarital coitus in the White House. You know, I already said blowjob, but since we're already there. But it's amazing to me how you can be impeached for something like that And yet, when Trump does something this crazy, as far as trying to distance himself and say, I don't know the gentleman, when obviously you do, when your former your former defense secretary is now about to come forward with evidence, and the only reason I can think of that he's not coming with it voluntarily is because the simple fact of the matter is that he himself might be implicated. So at this point, he's probably trying to seek a deal to where it's like, hey, I'm going to roll over on Trump. I don't want it to come back on me. That's what I took from that. And really off the top of all this stuff, it is amazing how Trump is simply saying, well, I don't want those individuals, those foreign leaders that I talk to know that their calls being recorded and being put out for the world to see. Duh. Every call between a Democrat, every call between a diplomat is recorded on both sides. So to him to sit there and say that amazes me so. But again, I can't blame the Democrats for moving forward because this is what they ran off of on their previous election cycle. They sat there and said, we are going to impeach Trump. It looks like it's probably starting to head that way. It looks like it's finally starting to get traction. And you can see Trump immediately going back to his old ways. I'm going to sue, keep suing. I'm also going to deny. I'm going to distance myself. And I'm going to keep saying everything's all fake until it goes away. Not this time. But unfortunately, President Cheeto, he's actually grinding my gears. And I'll tell you why he grinded my gears is because of this right here.
We're going to travel all across the country to every community, urban, rural, and suburban, and we're going to campaign for every last African American vote in 2020. The Republican Party was the original home of African Americans, and now African Americans are returning. It was a 100-year trip, if you think about it. We've done more for African Americans in 3 years than the broken Washington establishment has done in more than 30 years. Last month, the African American unemployment rate reached the lowest level ever recorded in the history of our country. How do you lose that argument in a debate, right? The African American youth unemployment, this was so important to me. You remember how high it was, 60, 70%? Has now reached the lowest number ever recorded in the history of our country, doing really well. The African American poverty rate has reached an all-time historic low, lowest it's ever been. For the first time ever, most new hires of prime working age are minorities and women. First time that's ever happened. Wages are rising really fast, up 9% since the election, a number that was unthinkable. And they're rising fastest for low-income workers. Proportionately, they're rising the fastest for the low-income worker. Who would have thought this was going to happen? Almost 2.5 million Americans have been lifted out of poverty since my election, including 150,000 African American children. 150,000. It's a lot. See, when I hear 150,000, a lot of people don't know what it means. You know what it means to me? We fill up Yankee Stadium 3 times. 3.
Yeah. Let me say why all that was just bullshit right there. Because this is Trump's way of, as they say, urban outreach, getting the black vote, as what they really want to say. But, they can't because they're trying to be, as politically correct as possible. But it pretty much was him getting the black vote. And this is where he turns around and says, well, let me tell you all the things I've done. And this is where he puts on that celebrity apprentice hat and he goes, well, this is what I've done for you people. And it was funny where he sat there and says, I have the lowest unemployment in U.S. history for African Americans. Bullshit. You were trying to seek credit that it wasn't you. It's true, and I've always said it best because I've had people who are conservatives come back and say, well, you can't argue with the facts. It's true. The black unemployment rate hit a record low under his administration. Here's the thing. It had nothing to do with whatever Trump was doing. If you follow the economic trail, it actually started back in 2009. Don't know if Trump was paying attention, but around 2009, a certain black president was running the show against a House and a Senate that wanted nothing to do with him. And that's where the actual trail started, to where it led to black unemployment rate. You just happen to be the guy who's in position now to be able to try to take credit for something that you had nothing to do with. This is a fact. He also tried to sit there and say again that black people under his administration have had higher incomes. No. Again, this goes back to 2009. You weren't president in 2009. This actually goes back to President Obama. And at the same time, if you really want to be honest, since your tax plan, the income rates for African Americans has actually dropped. So again, and honestly, the income among African Americans was actually higher under President Obama than it currently is under President Trump. You can't. It's funny where it says you can't. It's funny where he sat there and says, "Well, you can't argue with numbers." Well, you're right. You can't argue with numbers, but the numbers don't show your administration is successful. You just happen to be the guy that comes in and takes credit for the previous guy. So again, I just love the fact when he talks about, well, black poverty and things of that nature and all this. I'm like, dude, you're basically taking credit for what the black guy did, which is usually the MO of most of certain white people out there. Y'all do take credit for things that literally you didn't help, invent, abolish, or affect. Shouldn't be surprised. It's your business 101 as far as closing the deal. But speaking of closing deals, I want to know who this anonymous writer is. And for all those that don't know, this is the story I'm talking about.
From an insider named Anonymous, the senior official who wrote an essay in the New York Times last year warning about the president has expanded it into a 259-page book urging voters to replace Trump. Our chief White House correspondent John Carl has the details. Good morning, John.
Good morning, George. We still have no idea who Anonymous is. The author is described only as a senior Trump administration official, but we don't know if it is a current official or a former official. The book, written by Anonymous, describes a staff in revolt against the president they serve. The book, entitled A Warning, isn't out for another 11 days, but the Washington Post obtained an early copy. It claims senior officials were so alarmed by the president's behavior last year, they considered a midnight self-massacre, a mass resignation and protest. But they decided against it because they believed it would cause even more chaos. Anonymous paints a picture of an out-of-control president, like a 12-year-old in an air traffic control tower, pushing the buttons of government indiscriminately, indifferent to the planes skidding across the runway and the flights frantically diverting away from the airport. The unnamed author also accuses the president of routinely making crass comments about women and their appearance, and using racist language to describe migrants crossing the southern border. We get these women coming in with like 7 children, Trump said, according to the book. They are saying, "Oh, please help. My husband left me. They are useless. They don't do anything for our country. At least if they came in with a husband, we could put them in the fields to pick corn or something." The book follows the New York Times op-ed written by Anonymous more than a year ago that described a quiet resistance inside the Trump administration. Now the mysterious author says, "I was wrong. Unelected bureaucrats and cabinet appointees were never going to steer Donald Trump the right direction in the long run, or refine his malignant management style. He is who he is." The White House response comes in the form of a statement from Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham, who writes, quote, "The coward who wrote this book didn't put their name on it because it is nothing but lies."
John, are they?
I don't know about that. I mean, I understand they want to go anonymous. Let's be honest. You want to go anonymous just because immediately they're going to come at you. Now, I'm not saying that the guy or person, I shouldn't assume it's a guy, the individual who named themselves anonymous apparently has a lot. For them to sit there and say it's a hoax and things of that nature, they got a lot of background that kind of matches up to what we know about Trump. Now, the book itself is similar to the op-ed, the New York Times, where you have an individual that's pretty much saying everything that we suspected or confirmed or already knew about this administration. Most importantly, this president. He's an idiot. And it's funny where they try to say, well, that's not true. This didn't happen. Well, if you think about it, look at his current administration. Almost 85% of his original administration is gone. That is more than half of his original staff is gone, whether they were fired, replaced, indicted, arrested, or put in prison. Name me one other administration in history that has had that much turnover. That's like running a call center to me. But again, I can't really be mad at the anonymous person for wanting to remain that way. It could be for personal protection. It could be for the fact that they don't want to be outed. For all we know, it could have been his daughter to begin with. But that's few far and in between. But it's still an interesting thing. I wanted to actually take a look at that book, but I kind of confirmed, but it'll probably confirm where I already know that we pretty much have a toddler in the White House. And speaking of people that shouldn't have their jobs, Betsy DeVos, remember her, our current Secretary of Education. She's facing a current lawsuit right now because she was still collecting debt. She was still collecting student loans from those that had went to a pair of for-profit colleges that turned out to be nothing more than pyramid schemes. Well, she's facing a lawsuit. Basically because her company, for her to be the Secretary of Education, she still has stake in a college debt company that was still collecting debts. She has now decided that she will forgive certain student loans for more than 1,500 borrowers who attended these colleges last year. Here's the problem I have with that. There was initially a student loan forgiveness program out there. Not the scams you see on Facebook. There was an actual one. For public services, for people being teachers, workers, things of that nature. Hundreds of thousands of people applied, but I think maybe 1% got actually accepted for their loans to be forgiven. 99% of the applicants were rejected. And for Betsy DeVos, and I said, this is what I sit there and say is the problem. Betsy DeVos is not an educator. She is simply a billionaire that bought her job and is literally destroying the education or the lack of an education, I should say, in the U.S. currently right now. And the simple fact of the matter is, the fact that she still has stake in a debt company that specifically targets student loans, how is this not a conflict of interest? She has the ability to forget. She has the ability to put forth a plan that can forgive every U.S. person of their student loans, but chooses to go after them because basically it fills her coffers. So we really shouldn't be surprised at this point that now she's getting sued and all the heat's on her, which I'm still surprised she still hasn't resigned yet, is now going to forgive 1,500 people like that's some sort of charity. And that's the one thing I just can't get away from that, is just the simple fact of the matter is you're not qualified in any way or form. But at the same time, because you're facing a lawsuit, already facing fines for still collecting on individuals, but still now facing a lawsuit, this gesture of forgiving 1,500 people just seems like bullshit to me and a way to save your ass. But you really want true forgiveness? How about we take your fortune and pay off those student loans, and then you get to see how it feels. But that's just me. But speaking of other things that just also need to have a light put on them, Jim Jeffries. For all those that don't know who he is, I'm sorry, not Jim Jeffries, Jim Jordan. I got a comedian and a politician mixed up. I apologize. Jim Jordan, for all those that don't know, I like to call him one of the Trump cheerleaders, right alongside Lindsey Graham. Well, he's kind of in hot water, and the reason why is not to do with Congress.
Congressman Jim Jordan tonight facing a new accusation that he ignored warnings about an Ohio State University doctor accused of sexually abusing nearly 200 men over 2 decades. In a lawsuit filed Thursday, a college wrestling referee named as John Doe 42 says in the mid-90s he told Jordan, then Ohio State's assistant wrestling coach, that the team's physician, Richard Strauss, performed a sex act in front of him in a shower. The referee says Jordan and the team's then head coach shrugged it off, responding, "Yeah, that's Strauss." The referee and his attorney declined to be interviewed on camera.
Everybody talked about Strauss.
Former Ohio State wrestler Dunyasha Yetz also says he complained directly to Jim Jordan after he says Strauss once tried to pull his pants down.
I had told him, hey, this is not right.
Yet, who's not part of the latest lawsuit, says Jordan failed to address it. Jordan has previously denied having any knowledge of the abuse, saying the allegations that he was told about it are politically motivated. His office did not respond to our request for comment. The lawsuit comes as House Republican leaders today named Jordan to the House Intelligence Committee, giving Jordan, known as President Trump's most aggressive defender, a more prominent role in the committee's public impeachment hearings. Tonight, OSU called Strauss's actions reprehensible, adding it has implemented multiple additional safeguards in the 20 years since Strauss left the university. Strauss died by suicide in 2005, his horrifying legacy raising new questions about what should have been done to stop him. Jeff Bennett.
And all I can say is Ohio State. But again, Jim Jordan at this point, like I said, because he always says politically motivated, I'm along the lines of, how did you not know? Keep in mind, we're not too far off from Jerry Sandusky's case, where the assistant coach came forward and literally said that he's abusing these kids, and they try to sweep that under the rug until new light came out. And of course, from there, Jerry Sandusky was put in prison. Joe Paterno was fired and eventually passed away, and Penn State got a reckoning. So, what's to do with Ohio State? Well, with Ohio State, of course, you can't really go after the guy that's actually been the accused of this since he took his own life. However, 177 students, and you're one of the politicians who was there at the time, and you're denying it. Keep in mind, you can still be brought up on charges. If a mother can still be put in jail for not reporting child abuse for 15 years, then yes, you yourself can be seen as that. And of course, that says a lot about Jim Jordan right now, because he wants to sit there and say, well, those allegations are truly false. Doesn't seem to be adding up with your story, Jim, but good luck with that. But then again, I shouldn't expect this from a person that's supporting Trump. Simply put, the simple fact of the matter is they're used to denying everything when it's true. So we'll see how that story goes. Speaking of crazy stories, I don't know what it is about Florida, but Florida and Florida man just seem to be taking the cake. And unfortunately, this time this is involving children. And go ahead and keep your eyes. This is going to be a little bit graphic.
This Florida school resource officer immediately fired as soon as this video of him grabbing a middle school student and threatening others went viral.
This is because you're silly. You're all stupid little children.
Police say the other officer there with the Orange County Police responded first and de-escalated a large fight. Body cam footage shows the still unidentified school deputy step in.
What I saw was a person who was out of control and basically lost it. I certainly can't have that person around our students.
The second violent confrontation revealed this week at a Florida school. A school deputy in Broward County seen slamming a 15-year-old girl to the floor. The surveillance video from September, the school deputy charged with child abuse without great bodily harm.
I would hope that every cop in America would disagree with that type of response.
And earlier this year, yet another violent arrest. A teenager's head banged against the ground near a high school, also in Broward County.
You're the one who started this school.
Tonight, this student who wasn't arrested is with her family. The fired school deputy also now the subject of a criminal investigation. Ron Allen and
What the fuck, Florida? And yes, that's a fair point. I mean, all these events did happen in Florida. Not to say that Florida is not the only state that's actually had this issue, but multiple states as well. But it's almost going back to, again, with law enforcement and school resource officers. The training itself, I have to question. And I'm not saying that there aren't good school resource officers out there. I've known plenty in my lifetime that have learned to connect and work with children without actually using violence. It just seems to me that this nowadays, as we have new officers come forward, you start to question the training, you start to question the hours, you start to question of everything they have when dealing with children. Is using over excessive force the best way to handle it? Of course not. Especially in a school where you can get slammed, where you can get your head pulled and things of that nature. It just honestly makes no sense for an officer to go that route. So at least they did the right thing in making sure that officer is no longer an officer and is facing criminal charges. He should. And at the same time, if I was the parents of those kids, I would be suing. Suing the pants off the school and the state system. only because at this point it's almost to the point now. I see why. You know what? I see why I don't make fun of homeschool people no more. Because if you think about the fact that your child might get body slammed by an officer at school, homeschool ain't a bad idea. But again, I can see that, and again, it just, Florida. But aside from that, guys, some more news as far as the stock market goes. Not really much in the way of business about the Dow jumping 200 points to record highs. Basically because, and I stress this very heavily, reports China and U.S. will lift some tariffs. This is not confirmed. Keep in mind the stock market and how it works off. The stock market pretty much works off influences. If there's a hurricane, or if oil refineries get hit, or if certain deposits are getting nailed, or if certain areas that we used to get things from are no longer there, all those things can affect the stock market. But keep in mind, we still have the ongoing war because President Cheeto decided to start a tariff war with China. Again, I have said it once, I'll say it again. You're not going to win a manufacturing tariff with China. Most of the world's manufacturing comes from there. Most of our actual components come from there. Most of our products that are assembled come from there. So to you to sit there and put tariffs on China, and China turns on to put tariffs on us, it is really a losing battle. And the reason why it's a losing battle is because they corner the market. You can't corner their production, labor costs, and things of that nature. You just can't, because they pay their people way less under their regime versus us. It's just the way that it is. But the Dow hitting a new high because of that says nothing, because, as long as Trump is at the helm, the stock could take a crash the next day, which I feel bad for everybody with 401ks and mutual funds. But aside from that, the last story we'll get to before we get to our good news segment, I personally support this next story. And do I think it'll get implemented in America? Probably not. But again, it's nice. Check it out.
Erin McCoy crams a lot into her 40-hour-a-week job, but she does it in 4 days, not 5. Every weekend is 3 days long. Time for friends, hiking, and family.
When I come back, I just feel so much more refreshed and ready for the work week than I have at other jobs where it was 5 days a week.
Graphic designer Killer Visual Strategies switched to 4-day work weeks 5 years ago after noticing productivity plunged on Fridays. Since the change, a turnaround. Productivity is up 20%. Employees choose whether to take Mondays or Fridays off.
Our goal was really focusing on bringing down that burnout and that stress, but we really weren't expecting to see such a boost in productivity.
Nationwide, 17% of employers offer the chance to compress the work week, squeezing the same number of hours into fewer days. When Microsoft tried a 4-day work week in Japan, productivity jumped 40%. The big benefits, say the hiring pros, the 4-day week helps cut the stress from the 24/7 environment so many people work in, expected to be just an email, a phone call, or a text away. And, says Killer Strategies, as companies struggle to find qualified employees amid low unemployment, its employees are staying much longer, finding a new work-life balance. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
You hear that, America? We found our solution. 4-day work weeks. I have been saying that for years, because simple fact of the matter is, guys, you could be at any company. They always talk about work-life balance, but let's be honest. Most of these places are 24/7. Most of these places have first, second, and third overnight and graveyard shifts. Most of these companies are pretty much seat fillers. If you don't fill your seat, or if something happens to you, they'll just turn around and put somebody else in it and keep the machine running. And they always talk, it always amazes me how employers talk about burnout. You burn out your employees. And so I love the fact that when I hear something of a 4-day work week, yes, because people need more time. The weekend, 2 days just ain't cutting it. You need 3 days. And what an amazing thing this company has done. It has shown that, yes, if you give a 4-day work week, and in this case, you gave individuals the ability to choose Friday off or Monday off, you still get the 3 days. And they're refreshed. They're happy. They're rested. Because I don't know about you guys, but a weekend ain't enough for me. It isn't. I'm sorry. 2 whole days is not enough. I mean, you gotta think, you work 40 hours plus during the week. And at the same time, Saturday comes. you're drained. You have nothing to do. Or you have things to do, but you got to get up and go do them. Or, for the simple fact of the matter, you have kids that have extracurricular activities or sports. You got to get up and do that. Then comes Sunday, usually your rest day, but you might have groceries, you might have laundry, you might have other things going on. So by the time Sunday night comes around, the so-called weekend where you can relax is really just additional work days, and at that point you're fucking tired. Only to turn around and go back and work on Monday drained. It only makes sense that, because most countries, like I said, I use Italy, Europe, basically most parts of Europe, I just say between France, Italy, Sicily, they have all adopted the 4-day work week to where they give their employees more time off because it equals productivity. Whereas us, I would love to sit there and say it's going to happen, but that would be a lot. But again, it's nice to know that there are statistics out there that prove that if we do have a 4-day work week, we do improve more. But let's see how that works. So we're going to go ahead and go into our good news segment, guys. What the good news segment is like I said, usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we do cover a lot of stuff that sometimes is not always all sunshine and rainbows. Sometimes it's dark. Sometimes it's really dark. But, it's the weekend. We try to leave you guys out on a good note, try to have a good feeling before we have to embrace the fact that Monday is coming and we're right back to work. So the stories I've found so far, which I'm surprised about this one. This kind of reminds me of Undercover Boss a little bit, where this boss pays off his employee's mortgage to allow him to retire early. Apparently, this man has been an auto mechanic at this place, guys, for 2006, and was about to retire next year after paying off his mortgage. His boss heard about it and has decided that, you know what, how much do you have left on your mortgage? The guy said, gives him set amount. They go to the bank and pay it off, and, his house is his. I don't know about y'all. I've never had a mortgage as of yet. I hear they're pretty much pains in the asses, but that's apparently unless you actually have the 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 or how much ever house you have in mind. The cost is to actually get that house flat out would be the only way you can get it. So I understand that, but I do like the fact that this boss did take it upon himself to say, you know what, let me just do something nice. Because there are some bosses out there that do nice things. Maybe not as nice as paying off houses and whatnot, but at least some nice things that, grand gestures of saying, hey, let me help you get there further, especially if I got the means to help with that. Speaking of things that actually help, if you're a bartender or a server, how do you feel about getting a $50,000 winning lottery ticket? Because I'll be honest with you, a customer basically paid this entire staff in Powerball tickets, and one of the people actually had I think it was 4 numbers, I want to say. Yeah, 4 out of 6 numbers, which basically I believe, well, no, that's wrong. Let me look at that. 4, oh, no, I was right. So, yeah, 4 out of the 5 numbers they hit. And because they hit 4 out of the 5 numbers, they got 50,000. And I don't know about y'all, but that's a wonderful way to end the shift. You get a Powerball ticket, and next thing you know, you go to check it, and you're thinking, oh, I didn't win shit. And then you look down, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we're not going to work for a couple of weeks. But, not enough to sit there and say, I quit this job. But come on now, 50,000, that's the majority of most folks' salary under the median income line. It does give you a little bit of breathing room to know that you got a year's worth of money that you can put away or invest in whatnot. I mean, I wouldn't invest now because of the stock market, but, hey. And finally, our last story, where this guy is a hero, in my opinion. This man right here, of course, you see the storyline where it says single dad adopts 5 siblings so they can stay together. This man has been honestly a foster parent for over 30 years. He's actually fostered many kids in the Buffalo, New York system. I think I said he fostered more than 30 kids. And now, the most recent one he picked up was that he had adopted the little girl he's holding right there, and apparently she had 4 other siblings, and he didn't want to split them up. So he decided he adopted all 5. Holy crap. And I'm not knocking it for those that have kids. If you have kids, you or my mom are superheroes anyway. But to be a foster parent, much less adopt children, that's a that's honorable. I can't knock that. I cannot disrespect that in any way. But this man took on 5. Woo! Good luck, sir. That's all I can say. 5 children. I mean, I love the fact of seeing someone stepping up and saying, you know what, these children deserve a home. Why not it be me? Even though it's 5 children, because that's why I'm kind of stuck at. Because single parent, 5 children. Woo! Oh, that's gonna make a wonderful sitcom. Anyway, that's all we have here, guys, for How the Frack We Got Here. Thank you so much for watching, and like I said, thank you everybody who has watched, who has shared, who has liked, subscribed. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because like I said, I'm trying to build this up to be a different type of news station, a different type of perspective, and things of that nature. And pretty much whenever you guys like it, whenever you share it, whenever you tell me about it, things that you like, things that you didn't like, it helps me make it better, because I'm doing this because the simple fact of the matter is we see news stations out there like this all the time, but we never see someone just go ahead and tell it like it is, which is the reason why I do this. So thank you so much for everybody who does that. Some shameless plug before I do get out of here. I'm not the only guy that actually has a podcast of my own. I'll start with Vaughn, Big BZA Big BZA podcast on YouTube, A.Witherspoon on Facebook. Has several podcasts of his own. He has the VST, which is a mini podcast of various news. That news can be music, that news can be video games, that news can be trailers, interactive show just like mine. He also has Rhythmness, where you can reminisce over the rhythm, in which he goes over albums past and currently present, in which he grades into a 4-tier rating system. If you see me on that show, there have been many times where there's some stuff I don't like because I'm that picky about music. But again, it's all about sharing musical tastes and opinions. Also interactive show as well. He also has Random as Fuck with Uncle VZ. What is Random as Fuck? Random as Fuck is the pool of ratchetness we sometimes dip our toes into to take a break from life and have a chuckle. Some videos will make you think, some videos will make you cry, some videos will just have you laughing. If you're on World Star Hip Hop right now, just look up Burger King on Fire while Customer is there. You won't be disappointed. But anyway, that's his shows that you can always go on his Facebook, Witherspoon, to see the calendar, to see when his podcast will be live on YouTube, Facebook, and all those other wonderful social media sites. Not too far from now, Thomas Reed, a.k.a. Mountain Puncher, will start his To Be Determined podcast. What is To Be Determined? To Be Determined is a fitness podcast. If you've seen Thomas, you understand this man works out every damn day. And I know I say that because he stays in the gym every damn day. But he loves fitness and loves talking about things loves talk about workouts, loves talk about nutrition, loves talking about subjects that he believes on his heart that actually help out the fitness world, especially if you're a beginner, you're an intermediate, you're an expert, just want a difference of opinion. Then To Be Determined Fitness Podcast would be for you. Would be later today at 3 p.m. Also on Facebook Live, just look up Thomas Reed from there, and also check out his YouTube page at To Be Determined. That is the number 2, letter T, letter B, letter D. So 2TBD on YouTube to see every podcast that he's done so far. And also my other buddy Trace Brown on Facebook. DJ King A. Wayne on YouTube has several podcasts of his own. He has The Bump Down, which is a musical podcast, which is music, culture, knowledge, and numbers, in which he goes over chart work, underground, and what's coming up, and also upcoming artists he's working with. He also has a segment to where if you want to submit music to him or Vaughn at Rhythmness, please reach out to both of them on Facebook and they'll give you the details on how to do so. We do encourage, but we're going to be honest, so you better bring that fire if you're going to want to hear your music played, because we will talk about you. Aside from the Bump Down, he actually has the Smoke of Truth, what I like to call the In Your Face, Check Your Ego at the Door podcast, because he is going to talk about the truth from the perspective from an unorthodox view. So if you're willing to listen, he's willing to talk and listen right back to you. So the Smoke of Truth can also be seen, also along with the Bump Down, can both be seen from his YouTube page as well as from his Facebook. Just look up Trace Brown on YouTube, DJ King Wayne on YouTube. I'm sorry, look up DJ King Wayne on YouTube. Yeah, and then look up Trace Brown on Facebook to see when he's dropping off. Now, aside from How the Frack We Got Here, which is usually my political podcast every Saturday from 10 a.m. to noon, I also tonight will have another podcast called Off Limits, which will be a little bit later at 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Now, what is Off Limits? Off Limits is the podcast that goes there. I say there, just the simple fact of the matter is, I like to tackle the subjects nobody likes to talk about. We've been told a long time ago you can't talk about sex, politics, religions with other people because it makes them uncomfortable. I believe a lack of those conversations has led to the simple fact of the matter we don't have civil conversations anymore. To me, people are yelling over each other, trying to get their points across, shove their opinion down each other's throats. At the end of the day, nobody's listening. I aim to change that. And by doing so, I am going to go there as far as subjects, because we definitely do go there on some subjects. But at the same time, we do so in a manner that is civilized and modern to prove that, yes, you can talk about sex, politics, religion, and you can learn from someone else who may have a different opinion than you. That's what Off Limits is about. So that's going to be a little bit later today on YouTube, a little bit today on Facebook Live and YouTube, a little bit later at 8 p.m. today. Aside from that, guys, my other buddy at Wingnut Gaming also has a channel of his own. What is Wingnut Gaming? My buddy Wingnut plays first-person shooters. He loves Battlefield 5, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Apex Legends. He loves Fortnite. His choice, not mine. But anyway, he's a very social cat, loves to be able to talk to people, but always wants to have people included on his gaming channel. So if you ever get a chance, just look at Wingnut Gaming on Facebook to go from there as far as seeing what he does. And also, if you do have a PlayStation or Xbox, you'll be able to play with him. And also, I'm going to start next, actually there's going to be a new podcast that I'm going to be doing Sunday. Is basically, I know I talked about this way back on my previous podcast, but I'm finally going to go ahead and do it this Sunday. It's going to be this Sunday night. It is going to be my gaming podcast. I know I'm going to talk a little bit more about the gaming industry as far as where it's headed and things of that nature goes, as well as certain things of that nature as far as just really an opinion as far as from a blurred side of where the gaming industry is going right now. So Get Bit is definitely going to happen this Sunday, which will basically be tomorrow. It'll probably be at 8 p.m., 10 p.m. Central Time on YouTube and Facebook. So definitely give that a like, as I'm going to be trying that new podcast tomorrow night. But definitely come back for us, especially for Thomas's To Be Determined, my Optimus podcast, which I hope to God everybody will be here. I'm almost certain everybody's going to be here. So I'm very excited about that. But aside from that, guys, the only thing I gotta say about how the Frack We Got Here is this. It is simply put, we are just trying to stay informed. What does staying informed mean? Staying informed means that you're just not looking at everything at face value. You're actually going beyond that. You're actually looking into the stories, finding out the research, and really finding the truth within there, and then being able to show somebody else what you found in hopes to encourage you to do the same. Because an informed community can make a lot better decisions than an uninformed one, because an uninformed one got us trumped, and that's honestly how the Frack We Got Here. So thank you all guys for watching. Again, if you like the show, let me know. If you don't like the show, feel free to let me know. I want to know anyway. I'm trying to make this better for all of you. So again, I'll take suggestions. I'll take comments. Of course, if there's also stories that I didn't cover that you want to see covered or you want to see me talk about, definitely let me know about that as well. And as always, like, share, and subscribe, because like I said, I'm doing this for the people. I'm trying to make this a platform that is really something that I want to be proud of, be able to move forward on. So thank you everybody that's always watching. Thank you for the likes. Thank you for the repeats. Thank you for the rewatches. Aside from that, guys, hope you have a wonderful Saturday. I'm pretty sure it's cold everywhere by now because winter is coming. Aside from that, guys, have a good weekend. I'm out. Peace.